Seminar number 11, Cross-Sectional Studies. Scientific research consists in seeing what everyone else has seen, but thinking what no one else has thought. A cross-sectional study is similar to a cohort study, except that all measurements are made at the same time. This figure is from the Hulley book. It is similar to the figure we saw in the cohort seminar, except that only one point in time is depicted. A cross-sectional study can be used to describe variables and their distribution patterns. It can also be used to examine associations if predictor and outcome variables are selected carefully by the investigator ahead of time. The cross-sectional study can be especially useful for determining the prevalence of a disease or problem at one point in time. To calculate the prevalence, the investigator or scholar divides the number with the disease at one point in time over the number at risk for the disease at the same point in time. Remember, a cohort study, which follows subjects over a period of time, can be used to calculate the incidence of disease, the number of new cases divided by the number at risk during the same time period. Incidence and prevalence are commonly confused terms, so it is a good idea to get these terms straight. An excellent example of a cross-sectional study was published in JAMA in 2003 by Schober and co-authors. Blood mercury levels in U.S. children and women of childbearing age, 1999 to 2000. The data for this publication were obtained from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, also known as NHANES. The NHANES studies are a series of studies sponsored by the federal government to determine the prevalence of various diseases and the distribution patterns of variables associated with those diseases at a single point in time using a large representative sample of the U.S. population. A lot of our knowledge about hypertension, obesity, and lead poisoning in this country comes from the NHANES studies. This excellent work by Schober nicely describes the prevalence of elevated mercury levels in women and children, two populations particularly vulnerable to the toxic effects of mercury, and this study was done during a single point in time. So what are some of the advantages of a cross-sectional study? Well, they are quick, cheap, and easy. A cross-sectional study can study several outcomes. It provides simple descriptive data. It is convenient for examining networks of links, and it is a good first step for a cohort study. And what are the disadvantages of a cross-sectional study? Well, a cross-sectional study does not establish a sequence of events because a single point in time is examined, yields relatively weak evidence for causality, cannot establish incidence, and cannot determine relative risk using this study design. In the next seminar, we will finally discuss the randomized clinical trial.